Have you ever felt like you were being valued, but only for what you could provide? As if your time, your effort, and even your emotions were being quietly exchanged for attention, validation, or benefits, without any real connection in return? And what if I told you that this behavior is not always about cruelty or manipulation alone, but often rooted in deeper psychological patterns that most people completely misunderstand? Today, we're diving deep into the psychology of women who use men, not to judge, not to shame, but to understand what really drives this behavior and how you can protect yourself from it without losing your empathy or your clarity. Before we begin, it's important to understand something crucial. Not all women behave this way, and not all situations are manipulative. But when patterns repeat, when effort flows in one direction, and when emotional investment is not reciprocated, there is psychology at play. And what makes this topic even more complex is that many women who use men are not always consciously aware of what they are doing, because these behaviors are often shaped by past experiences, emotional conditioning, and sometimes even survival instincts. So the real question is not just what they do, but why they do it. And more importantly, how you can recognize the signs before it's too late. The first psychological pattern is what we can call the validation seeker. Someone who relies heavily on external attention to feel worthy, attractive, or important, and who may use men as a constant source of emotional reassurance. This behavior often stems from low self-esteem, unresolved emotional wounds, or a history of inconsistent affection, where attention becomes addictive, and relationships become transactional rather than meaningful. Instead of seeking connection, she seeks confirmation, and instead of building intimacy, she collects admiration, often without realizing that she is draining others in the process. And the dangerous part is that she may genuinely believe she likes you, when in reality, she simply likes how you make her feel about herself. The second type is more strategic, often referred to as the opportunity maximizer. Someone who views relationships through a lens of benefit, where emotional connection is secondary to what can be gained, whether it is financial support, social status, or lifestyle advantages. This mindset is not always born out of greed, but sometimes from learned behavior, cultural conditioning, or past environments where relationships were modeled as exchanges rather than emotional bonds. In such cases, affection can feel real, but it is often conditional, subtly tied to what you provide rather than who you are, creating a dynamic where your value is constantly measured rather than appreciated. And over time, this creates a silent imbalance, where one person gives, and the other calculates. The third type is the emotional manipulator, someone who may consciously or unconsciously use emotional tactics such as guilt, withdrawal, or inconsistency to maintain control in the relationship. This behavior often originates from a need for control, especially if past experiences involved instability, betrayal, or emotional neglect, where control becomes a way to feel safe. She may alternate between affection and distance, creating confusion, making you work harder for approval, and slowly conditioning you to accept less while giving more. And what makes this especially dangerous is that it does not feel like manipulation at first. It feels like love that you need to earn. Now here is the uncomfortable truth. These dynamics do not exist in isolation, because for every pattern of using, there is often a pattern of tolerating. Many men fall into these situations not because they are weak, but because they are empathetic, hopeful, and willing to invest deeply, sometimes ignoring red flags in the belief that things will eventually improve. There's also a psychological factor known as intermittent reinforcement, where inconsistent rewards create stronger emotional attachment, making it even harder to walk away. So what feels like love is often a cycle of reward and withdrawal, keeping you emotionally hooked without true stability. So how do you recognize if you are being used? Especially when emotions are involved and clarity becomes difficult. Look for patterns rather than isolated incidents, because patterns reveal truth, while moments can be misleading. If effort is consistently one-sided, if communication happens only when convenient for them, if your needs are minimized while theirs are prioritized, and if your value seems tied to what you provide rather than who you are, then you may not be in a relationship, but in a transaction. And perhaps the most telling sign is how you feel, because deep down, confusion, exhaustion, and self-doubt are not signs of a healthy connection. Protection does not mean becoming cold or distrustful. It means becoming aware, setting boundaries, and valuing yourself enough to walk away from dynamics that drain you. Clarity comes from observing actions rather than believing words. And strength comes from understanding that your worth is not determined by how much someone else chooses to give you. And most importantly, healthy relationships do not require you to prove your value repeatedly, because they recognize it naturally. So instead of asking how to keep someone, ask whether they deserve to stay. Understanding psychology is not about blaming others. It is about gaining clarity, protecting your energy, and building healthier connections in your life. If this video made you see something differently, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Mind Science Simplified. Because the more you understand the mind, the more control you gain over your life. Have you ever experienced something like this? Share your story anonymously below.